The church bells were still ringing when I saw him slip away. "Just a quick call," he whispered to my bridesmaid, but something in the way his jaw tightened made my stomach twist. I followed. Quiet steps, my white gown brushing cold stone. In a dark cathedral hallway, I heard my fiancé say my name, but the voice on the other end wasn't congratulating him. It was negotiating a price. What happened next changed everything. And trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. If you love stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the twist waiting at the end. The cathedral's air was heavy, thick with the scent of incense and polished wood. My heart was already pounding from the anticipation of walking down the aisle. But when I saw James slip quietly through the side door, everything inside me paused. He didn't look back. He didn't notice me watching from behind a marble pillar. I caught a glimpse of him leaning toward one of the groomsmen, his voice low, almost casual. "Just a quick call," he murmured. Almost casual, but not quite. Something about the way his shoulders tightened as he walked away made my stomach knot. I hesitated only a second before I followed. My heels clicked softly on the tiled floor, the sound swallowed by the vast silence of the side hallway. My gown trailed behind me, lace hem brushing the cold stone, veil shifting with each step. The corridor was dim, only lit by thin slices of stained glass light spilling across the floor. My breath felt too loud, my pulse too fast. I stayed in the shadows. Then I heard my name. "She doesn't suspect a thing. We'll sign the merger papers tonight." James's voice was calm, confident. A second voice came through, low, distorted, almost swallowed by the echoing hall. "And the transfer to your father-in-law's account?" James replied without hesitation. "Already arranged. Once she's mine, so is everything else." For a moment, the words didn't register. They floated towards me like they were in another language. But the tone, calm, deliberate, carved into me. My skin prickled. I moved one step closer. My veil snagged on a candle sconce. My fingers froze on the lace as the second voice spoke again. "And if she resists?" James chuckled softly. "She won't. She's not that type." My nails dug into my palms until I felt skin break. Somewhere in the main hall, the organ began to play. My cue to walk down the aisle. I could picture it. The long aisle, lined with flowers, white light streaming through stained glass, James waiting with that perfectly rehearsed smile. The same smile he wore now, while sealing my fate over the phone. I tore my veil free from the sconce. The lace ripped, the sound sharp in the silence. And as he ended the call with the words, "By tonight, she'll be ours," I understood. Not his, not mine, theirs. In that instant, the fairy tale collapsed. I wasn't a bride walking towards my future. I was property being delivered. And if I stepped toward that altar, I would never get my life back. 6 months earlier, I truly believed I was living the happiest moment of my life. It was late spring, the kind of evening where the air smells of jasmine and the sky turns golden before melting into deep blue. My parents' garden was glowing under strings of fairy lights. The soft murmur of guests mixed with the rustle of leaves and the warm breeze. James was standing there, framed perfectly under the old oak tree. He wore a navy suit that made his eyes look even bluer, and in his hands, a small velvet box. My father stood just a few steps behind him, hands in his pockets, smiling wider than I had ever seen. I thought that smile was pride. Now, I know it was profit. James dropped to one knee.
His voice was steady, but I saw the smallest tremor in his hand as he opened the box. He looked up at me and said, "Sophia, I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I said yes before he even finished the question, my voice breaking with joy. Applause erupted around us. My father stepped forward and clapped James on the shoulder, the kind of firm, satisfied gesture a man gives when closing the most important deal of his life. That night, I told myself, this is what love feels like. From that moment, we were inseparable. Long dinners that stretched into midnight, quiet walks by the river, him brushing a strand of hair from my face like I was the only woman in the world. He called me Angel in public, and my prize in private. I laughed at the second one. It sounded old-fashioned, maybe even a little silly. But there were cracks I didn't want to see. He never let me hold his phone, not even to check the time or look up directions. He always stepped just far enough away when answering calls so that I couldn't hear a word. I told myself it was work, that he was just being discreet, that some people needed their space. And my father, he adored James, more than I'd ever seen him adore anyone I dated. Dinners at home became less about me and James as a couple and more about my father and James discussing opportunities. I didn't notice the way their conversations shifted from my future to their future. I should have asked why my father's eyes lit up when James spoke about corporate shares, but barely flickered when I spoke about floral arrangements for the wedding. I should have wondered why James seemed more excited about my mother's estate than about the honeymoon. But I didn't, because when you think you're in love, you don't investigate happiness. You just live inside it. And back then, I thought I was living in the first chapter of my own fairy tale.
The organ swelled from the main hall, crashed against me like a wave. It was my cue, the moment every guest, every camera, every heartbeat in that cathedral was waiting for. But I couldn't move. Somewhere down the hallway, James was ending his call. I couldn't hear the words anymore. I didn't need to. I had already heard enough to poison the air between us forever. I gripped the edge of my gown, feeling the delicate lace dig into my fingers. My whole body was trembling, not from nerves, but from something older, deeper. The same instinct I'd felt once when a car ran a red light and I jumped back just in time. Get out. My breathing turned shallow. My vision narrowed until the hallway stretched into a tunnel. At the end of it, through the archway, I could see the faint shimmer of the aisle, the flashes from cameras, the smiling faces turned toward the door that would never open. One step, then another, but not toward the light. I turned sharply, lifting my skirts in both hands, and headed for the side exit. The cool air outside hit me like a slap, crisp, alive, real. The city's noise slammed into me. Traffic, laughter from a nearby cafe, the distant wail of a siren. The wind caught my veil and tore it from my head. I didn't chase it. I let it fly. A taxi slowed as it passed the cathedral steps. The driver leaned out the window, eyes wide at the sight of me. Wedding over already? I slid into the back seat, the heavy fabric of my gown tangling around my legs. No, I said, my voice steady now. It never started. The driver gave me a small, knowing smile in the mirror. Cold feet? I met his gaze without flinching. No, hot rage. The taxi pulled away. The cathedral disappeared behind us. I didn't look back, because I knew, if I did, I might hesitate.
and hesitation was exactly what they were counting on. I didn't sleep for the first 48 hours. The taxi had dropped me in a part of the city where no one would think to look. My cousin Mia's cramped third-floor apartment above a laundromat became my hiding place. The air smelled faintly of detergent and fried food from the shop downstairs, but to me it was the scent of safety. I stayed off social media, kept my phone switched off except for short bursts to check the news. The wedding, according to the official statement, had been postponed due to a family emergency. No mention of a missing bride, no mention of me at all. The silence was deliberate. I realized that quickly. If they could erase me from the narrative, they could control it. I couldn't let that happen. On the third night, Mia sat across from me at her tiny kitchen table, a chipped mug of coffee in front of her. "You can't just hide forever, Soph," she said softly. I shook my head. "I'm not hiding," I told her. "I'm collecting." And I was. Every scrap of memory, every strange moment I'd ignored, I wrote them all down in a notebook. Dates, times, names. The business card from the man in the gray suit, still tucked in my wallet. The sudden influx of calls my father had taken during our engagement, I remembered the area codes. By the end of that week, I had a map. I began making calls, not to friends, but to lawyers, to the accountant who had managed my mother's estate, to an old colleague of hers who now worked as an investigative journalist. I spoke carefully, never giving the full story, just enough to keep them listening. Piece by piece, the picture came together. Offshore accounts, shell companies, a trail of mergers that began with marriages and ended with women left penniless. My father and James weren't partners in love, they were partners in theft. The anger that had been boiling in me since the cathedral hardened into something sharper. Purpose. I wasn't going to just escape. I was going to make them regret ever choosing me. The plan was simple on paper, impossible in execution. Draw them in, make them believe I was coming back, record every word that would bury them. By the time the first snow fell outside Mia's window, I knew exactly how I'd do it, and exactly what I'd wear when I faced them again. The night I chose for the confrontation was deliberate, private, controlled. I invited them both, James and my father, to a reconciliation dinner, a quiet evening, just family. That's what I told them. They came, of course they came. I arrived last, in the same ivory silk dress I'd worn to my engagement party. My hair swept up, makeup flawless. I looked like the woman they thought they had broken, except for the steel in my eyes. The private booth was deep and shadowed, lit only by a single candle between us. The low hum of the restaurant gave the illusion of privacy, but I had already planted the truth. 2 hidden microphones, one in my clutch, another beneath the table. A small camera in my pocket, angled just right. James stood when I approached, his smile practiced, the same one I had once mistaken for love. My father didn't bother standing. He simply leaned back, assessing me like I was a market trend. The waiter came and went. Wine was poured. I let the silence stretch until I saw the faintest flicker of impatience in my father's eyes. He broke first. "So," he said, his tone light, "you've had your break. Are we ready to put this behind us?" Behind us, as if betrayal was a misplaced receipt. I met his gaze and answered softly, "No, Dad, we're going to put it on record." James shifted in his seat. "Sophia, don't be dramatic. You misunderstood." I leaned forward, my voice steady. Oh, I understood perfectly. The merger, the transfer to Dad's account, the pattern of marriages that leave women bankrupt and you two richer. Their eyes flicked toward each other, a tiny flash of panic. I didn't smile. "You didn't think I'd figure it out. You didn't think I'd fight. But here's the thing. I'm exactly that type." The candle between us flickered. My clutch sat on the table, recording every word. The microphone beneath the table caught the sound of James's hand tightening into a fist, the subtle change in my father's breathing. I slid my phone across the table. On the screen was a live video feed. A journalist I trusted was watching, recording. Smile for the camera. You're about to be famous. James's chair scraped back. You have no idea what you're doing. I stood, looking down at him. No, James, you had no idea who you were marrying. And then I walked out. Neither of them followed. They couldn't. The trap had already closed.
The fallout was faster than I expected. By sunrise, the next morning, the footage was everywhere. Front pages, breaking news alerts. In offices, people leaned over coffee cups, whispering. In boardrooms, executives were suddenly rethinking their partnerships. There was no denying it. My father's voice, calm and calculating, discussing me like an acquisition. James' laugh, cold and certain, sealing the deal. Their lawyers worked overtime, but it was like trying to plug holes in a dam with their bare hands. The regulatory board froze assets linked to the shell companies. The media dug into old cases. Other women, other so-called mergers. Patterns emerged like bloodstains under a blacklight. Business partners who had once toasted with them now refused to take their calls. Stock prices tumbled. My father's name, once a symbol of power, became a warning. James' phone, I heard, didn't stop ringing, but now it was debt collectors, reporters, and friends demanding repayment of old favors. But that wasn't the twist. The real twist was something only I knew. The company's shares they had been circling like vultures, my mother's legacy, the bait in their trap, were untouchable. Weeks earlier, before I fled the wedding, I had transferred controlling interests to a women's legal aid foundation in my mother's name. It was legal. It was airtight. It was irreversible. They couldn't sell it, couldn't use it, couldn't even touch it. I watched my father's press conference from Mia's couch. Harsh lights washed the color from his face as he stumbled through a statement about misunderstandings and media misrepresentation. He looked smaller, like a man who had been stripped of the one thing he valued most, control. James didn't appear at all. Rumor had it he'd left the city. But even if he ran to the ends of the earth, his reputation, the thing he had treasured above everything, was already ash. I didn't gloat, not out loud, but there was a deep, quiet satisfaction in knowing I hadn't just escaped them. I had cut the strings they used to control others. They had planned to make me theirs. Instead, I made sure they had nothing. The wedding gown is still with me. It sits inside a plain cardboard box at the back of my closet. The ivory silk is folded neatly. The torn veil rests on top, untouched since the night the wind tore it away. I could have sold it, donated it, burned it in some dramatic gesture. But I didn't. Because to me, it isn't a symbol of the day my life fell apart. It's the armor I wore into battle. Sometimes on quiet nights, when the city hums faintly beyond my window, I think about what would have happened if I'd walked down that aisle. How many more women they would have destroyed. How much of myself I would have lost piece by piece, year after year, until nothing remained but a hollow shell in a silk dress. I glance at the box then, and the memory of that cold cathedral hallway rushes back. The smell of incense, the echo of my name, the exact moment the fairy tale shattered. And I smile. Not because I'm bitter, not because I'm vengeful, but because I walked away, because I fought, because I won. I was supposed to be a bride, I tell people when they ask. Instead, I became their predator.
And I have never been happier to say happily ever after, alone.